Have you ever watched your world collapse from simply opening a door? I have. And what I saw on the other side was the unthinkable. My name is Eleanor Grace Mitchell, but folks around here just call me Ellie. I'm 68 years old now, living in a quiet little town in rural Alabama where porches still creak, people wave from across the street, and everyone thinks they know your life. But trust me, they don't. I got married young, just 17 years old, to Michael, who was 22 at the time. My daddy, George, gave us his blessing without hesitation. In fact, he seemed to like Michael almost too much. But I chalked it up to respect. Over the years, we built what looked like a simple, stable life. Holiday dinners, backyard barbecues, church on Sundays. From the outside, we were just another loving Southern family. Never, not in my wildest dreams, did I suspect the two men I loved most in the world were hiding something from me. Something that had started 20 years ago and continued behind closed doors. In quiet glances. In business trips that weren't what they seemed. And then, this morning, I came home early from work. I opened the door, and I saw it. My husband, my father, together. No clothes, no shame, just ... the truth. Raw and undeniable. The antagonists. Silence, deceit, cowardice. The secondary characters? My children. The nosy neighbors. And that nurse at the clinic who always gave me a strange look, like she knew something I didn't. The central theme: family betrayal, emotional incest, devastation, the turning point. That one frozen moment the day I walked in and found them. The tone: heart-wrenching, intimate, honest, and eventually, empowering. The dominant emotion: at first, shock and despair. Then, humiliation and grief. And finally, resilience and rebirth. Setting: a modest wooden house with a wraparound porch, sitting on the edge of a sleepy southern neighborhood. It's autumn. The trees are fire engine gold. The air carries that sharp, smoky scent of fallen leaves. And there's a soft, constant rain tapping on the windows. Like the sky itself was weeping for me. This is the story of a woman who was betrayed in the deepest, most unthinkable way, and still found the strength to stand back up. And now, I'm still standing. I'm still here. And I'm more alive than ever. You know that feeling? When your body's still, but your heart's screaming so loud it shakes the walls. That was me. Standing in my own doorway, watching everything I believed in shatter in front of me. I never thought I'd live to say these words out loud. Never thought I'd sit down, old and tired as I am, and let this truth bleed from my chest like an open wound. But I've learned something in my 68 years on this earth. The deepest betrayals don't always come from strangers. Sometimes, they come from the arms that once tucked you in at night. And the lips that swore I'd do at the altar. I had spent decades building a life I thought was real. The Sunday breakfast. The porch swing confessions, the homemade pies cooling on the windowsill, while the two men I trusted most traded glances behind my back. They laughed at my stories, kissed my cheeks, and prayed beside me at church. And all the while, a lie was growing in the shadows of our home. 20 years long. 20 years. And today was the day it finally stood up and looked me in the eyes. But how does a woman survive something like that? How does she look her past, her family, in the face and decide she still wants to wake up tomorrow? Before I take you through what happened that morning, before I show you the room, the silence, the unbearable truth I saw with my own eyes, let me ask you, if everything you believed about love, loyalty, and blood was ripped from you in a heartbeat, would you still know who you are? And if this story stirs something in you, baby, if it tugs on a memory or a scar you never really healed, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to this channel, tap that little bell icon so you never miss when we share something raw and real. And stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you, it's going to change the way you look at love, and betrayal, and maybe even yourself. It was a Thursday morning, just like any other, or at least, that's what I thought. The kind of morning where the wind feels lazy, like it's still deciding whether to wake up or not. I remember that the house smelled like cinnamon and toast, the way it always does when fall rolls in early. The window over the kitchen sink was cracked just enough for the breeze to sneak in. And the soft rustling of leaves outside danced with the low hum of the radio playing Patsy Cline in the background. Michael had left already. Said he had a meeting in Montgomery. I didn't question it. I never did. After all these years, routine had become a blanket I wrapped around myself without thinking. Daddy had stayed the night again. Claimed he didn't feel right driving home in the rain. And I, always the caregiver, made up the guest bed with fresh sheets, just like Mama taught me. Hospitality, she used to say, is a woman's quiet strength. I sat at the table with my coffee, hands cupped around the mug like it held more than just warmth, maybe comfort, maybe denial. I looked out at the big oak tree in the front yard, the one Michael and I planted our first year married. Its leaves were turning amber, just like they did every September, and I found myself smiling without knowing why. Then the phone rang. It was the front desk nurse from the elementary school. One of the teachers had called in sick, and they were short on substitutes. "Could you come in just for the morning, Miss Ellie? Just a few hours?" Of course I said yes. I always said yes, even when I was tired, even when my own heart felt heavy with a sadness I couldn't name. I didn't notice Daddy watching me from the hallway. Not at first, but something about his eyes felt still, like water that knows a storm is coming. I kissed his cheek goodbye. He flinched. It wasn't until I was halfway down Main Street that something in me whispered, "Go back." And it wasn't a voice. Not really. It was a chill up my spine. The kind that doesn't come from wind, but from something deeper. Something ancestral. Intuitive. A knowing that doesn't need proof. I parked behind the Piggly Wiggly and just sat there, tapping the steering wheel, thinking about the way Daddy had looked at me, the way Michael had rushed out without even finishing his coffee. Then I turned the car around. I told myself it was nothing, that I'd forgotten to turn off the stove, or maybe I'd left the back door unlocked. That's how lies start, isn't it? Little things we say to ourselves to avoid looking into the fire. When I pulled into the driveway, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind had gone still. And somewhere between the porch steps and the front door, my heartbeat started to speed up. I could feel it pounding in my ears, louder than the creak of the floorboards, louder than the silence that greeted me inside. There was a jacket on the arm of the couch. Michael's. He wasn't supposed to be here. And that's when it began. The unraveling. The truth that had waited 20 years to finally show its face. But not yet. Not in this chapter. First, I need to tell you what made it so hard to see. Why the signs felt like shadows instead of spotlights. Because the scariest part about betrayal, my love, is that it doesn't come with thunder. It comes with silence. The warnings were always there. I just didn't want to see them. They say a woman can feel a lie before she hears it. That there's something ancient in us. A knowing passed down from our mothers' that tingles beneath the skin when something ain't right. And looking back now, I realize mine had been whispering to me for years. I just chose not to listen. Or maybe I was too scared to. I used to love that house with all my heart. A two-story, white-trimmed cottage in the quiet part of town where the mailman still knew your name and folks waved from their porches. The kind of place where time slowed down and memories clung to the walls like ivy. Our home was filled with the smell of biscuits, the sound of old country gospel, and the warmth of Sunday afternoons spent shelling peas with Daddy on the back porch. I thought it was a safe place. I thought I was safe. The hallway wallpaper, pale cream with delicate vines of blue roses, was chosen by me and Michael in our first year of marriage. I thought it was pretty, timeless. But years later, those vines started to feel like chains. Like every loop and spiral was another moment I'd dismissed. Another sign I'd brushed aside. There were things I should have noticed. Things I did notice, but tucked away like a bad dream. Daddy and Michael were always close. Too close, maybe. But I thought, well, they're both good men. They just understand each other. They'd sit on the porch long after I'd gone to bed, whispering low like boys plottin' summer mischief. They shared cigarettes, drinks, stories I wasn't allowed to hear. And laughter. So much laughter. Not the kind that fills a room, but the kind that cuts you out of it. Then there were the touches. Too familiar. A hand on a shoulder that lingered. Eyes that held a second too long. A private language that didn't need words. I saw it. God help me. I saw it. But I told myself, you're being dramatic. Don't be foolish. One summer, Michael and Daddy went camping in Tennessee. Just the two of them. No grandkids. No me. No explanation beyond. It's a guy thing. They came back sunburned and smiling. And Michael forgot our anniversary that week. He'd never missed it before. I cried in the bathroom while he snored on the couch, reeking of beer and smoke and something I couldn't name. I found receipts once, a motel off Highway 231, 2 nights. 1 room. He said he stopped to rest during a work trip. But why was Daddy's cologne in the same overnight bag? That was the night I sat alone in our kitchen, staring at the floral wallpaper until the vines started to twist. I thought I was going crazy. And maybe I was. Because love makes you do that. Makes you trade clarity for comfort. They both played their parts so well. Michael, the loyal husband. Daddy, the protective father. They were careful. So careful. And me, I was trusting. Blind, some would say. I'd wake up some nights and find the guest bed untouched. Daddy couldn't sleep, Michael would say. He was pacing downstairs. Other times, I'd catch them standing too close in the garage, just talking about the lawnmower. One of them would chuckle. I told myself they were just men. Private, guarded. That's all. But in the silence of those moments, my soul stirred. Like a storm rolling just beneath calm waters. I started noticing changes in me, too. I felt small in my own home, like a guest in the background of someone else's life. There were nights Michael wouldn't touch me at all. Not a kiss, not a brush of fingers. He said he was tired, said his back hurt, but his phone buzzed at strange hours. And Daddy, well, he'd go for long walks that didn't line up with anything he told me. I journaled about it, prayed over it, asked God if I was being paranoid. And when nothing changed, I did what women before me have always done. I stayed silent. I smiled. I made the coffee. I kept the house warm. But my body kept the score. The tension lived in my shoulders. The migraines, the shortness of breath, the sudden tears in the middle of folding laundry. I thought I was losing my mind, but now I see my spirit was trying to wake me up. That morning, the one where everything unraveled, didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building for years, quietly, like rot behind a wall. And when I left the school and turned my car back toward home, I didn't know why. I just, knew. Something inside me had risen. Something older than pain. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was God. I remember my fingers trembling on the steering wheel. The way the clouds darkened just a little, even though the forecast had promised sun. I pulled into the driveway. The porch was still, the air was thick, like the whole house was holding its breath. And so was I. I took one step toward the door, then another. My hand rested on the knob. That was the moment before. The very last moment I would ever believe my life was normal. I don't remember turning the knob. I just remember the feel of it. Cold. Almost heavy. Like it didn't want to be moved. Like it knew what waited behind it and was trying to spare me. But it turned anyway. And the door creaked open, slow as molasses, into the silence of my living room. At first, nothing looked out of place. The lamp was still on. The same one Michael always left lit when I left early. The cushions on the couch were a little crooked. A mug, my floral one, sat half empty on the coffee table. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the soft buzz of a ceiling fan upstairs. And then, I heard it. A sound. It wasn't loud, just a rustle. A whisper of fabric. But it didn't belong. Not in that moment. Not in that house. I took a step forward. The hallway stretched ahead of me like a tunnel, and at the very end, the guest room door was cracked open just an inch. A thin sliver of light peeked out. Something clenched in my chest. My throat went dry. I told myself, maybe Daddy just forgot to close the door. Maybe he's watching TV in there, or napping. But I knew better. God help me. I knew. Each step I took down that hallway felt like I was walking through molasses. Thick, slow, impossible. My legs barely moved, and my ears, they started ringing. My hands were trembling. The wallpaper, those vines and roses I once loved, they blurred at the edges like my eyes couldn't hold focus anymore. I reached the door, held my breath, and pushed. The door opened a few inches more. Enough for me to see the edge of the bed. The covers kicked back. Clothes on the floor. 2 sets. One shirt I knew like the back of my hand. Michael's blue flannel. The one he wore every Saturday. And beside it, my daddy's boots. Still warm from his feet, the light hit them just right. And for a second, my heart begged me not to look further. But I did. I pushed the door open all the way, and there they were. Michael, Daddy, in bed. Together, their backs to me, their bodies tangled, their skin bare, their silence louder than any scream I've ever heard in my life. I didn't scream. I couldn't. It was like my voice had left my body. I stood there, frozen. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My legs buckled beneath me, and I grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. The pain? It wasn't just emotional. It was physical. Like someone had stabbed my stomach from the inside and twisted. They didn't see me at first. But then Michael turned. Our eyes met. And that's when time stopped. His face went white, like a ghost. Like the truth had finally shown itself in daylight and couldn't run back into the shadows. Daddy sat up next. He didn't even try to cover himself. Just stared at me like a deer in headlights. There was no panic, no apology, just stillness and me. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just whispered one word. Why? Michael opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Daddy. He looked away. I stepped back. The hallway seemed longer now. The walls tighter. My whole body felt too small to hold that kind of betrayal. 20 years. 20 years. How many birthdays had they stood beside me with this secret between them? How many times had I told them I loved them, only to be met with lies? How many nights did they spend together under this same roof? My roof? While I lay sleeping in the next room. I stumbled outside. The air hit my face like ice. I leaned against the porch railing and threw up right there in the bushes. The neighbors probably saw. I didn't care. Everything was spinning. Everything was gone. The Michael I loved. The father I trusted. The life I thought was mine. Gone. And as I sat on those wooden steps, the wind picked up, cold, biting. I wrapped my arms around myself and rocked like a child. And then the tears came. Not gentle, not quiet. They came like a storm. I don't remember how long I stayed there. Might have been minutes. Might have been hours. The sky was gray by the time I stood. And something in me, something deeper than rage, older than sorrow, whispered, "You can't stay here. Not like this." I didn't know where I was going. Didn't pack a bag. Didn't leave a note. I just walked. And that was the beginning. Not of the pain, no. That had already begun. But of the becoming. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't even grab my purse. Just my car keys and the weight of a truth I could barely carry. The truth was so loud in my chest, it felt like I might explode if I stayed another second in that house. That house that had once been filled with music and Sunday pancakes and the illusion of safety, now it smelled like betrayal. I left the front door wide open behind me. It slammed shut in the wind. I drove without a destination, not toward a friend, or a church, or any place that might offer comfort. I didn't want comfort. I wanted a way. The road curled through Alabama like a ribbon left behind, stretching past cotton fields, rusty mailboxes, and roadside churches with fading paint. It's the kind of drive you take when you don't know whether you're running from something or toward yourself. I turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear apologies. Didn't want explanations. There was nothing they could say that would unsee what I saw. Nothing that could stitch that image out of my memory. My stomach churned. My hands trembled. I hadn't even cried yet. Not really. My body was too numb, my heart too stunned. I remember glancing down at my lap and realizing I was still wearing my floral apron from breakfast. I must have looked insane. A woman in slippers and an apron, fleeing from a storm no one else could see. I pulled into the parking lot of a roadside motel. It looked like it had been built in the 60s and never remodeled. The neon sign buzzed like a fly caught in a jar. Sunset Inn. Vacancy. Perfect. Inside, the front desk was unattended. A cracked bell sat on the counter. I rang it once, and a woman shuffled in from the back, hair wrapped in pink curlers, cigarette dangling from her lips. She didn't ask questions, just gave me a key labeled room 6, and slid a paper receipt across the counter. I paid in cash. I didn't want my name anywhere. The hallway was narrow and dim, carpeted in something that might have once been red. Room 6 was at the far end. When I opened the door, I was greeted by a wave of cold air and stale cigarette smoke. Inside, everything was beige. Beige walls, beige curtains, beige bedspread. The air was dry, the kind that clings to your throat. I stood in the middle of the room and looked around. There was a bed, a nightstand, a flickering lamp, and a dresser with a missing drawer. The kind of place where time forgets you. And maybe that's exactly what I needed. I sat on the edge of the bed. Then I laid back. Then I sat up again. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to be this woman, this version of me that no longer had a husband, a father, a family she could believe in. I walked to the bathroom, ran the faucet, splashed cold water on my face. My reflection looked like a ghost. Pale, eyes swollen, hair tangled. I didn't recognize myself. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I knew this was the real me. The one who had been buried beneath routines and casseroles and quiet suffering. I found the Bible in the drawer. I opened it to Psalms like my mama used to, but the words blurred on the page. So I shut it. And then, finally, I cried. I curled up on that stiff motel bed, pulled the coarse blanket around me, and sobbed into the pillow like my insides were being wrung out. No grace, no dignity, just pure grief. 20 years of lies unraveling inside my chest. The worst part? I wasn't just mourning the betrayal. I was mourning the me that believed I was loved. I thought about the birthdays they celebrated with me, the holidays, the way Daddy smiled when Michael opened gifts I picked, the way they laughed at jokes, only they understood. Had it all been fake? Had I just been a stand-in, a cover? I cried until I couldn't anymore, until my throat ached, and my body ached worse. At some point, I stopped crying. The room was silent, and I laid there with my eyes wide open, staring at the crack in the ceiling. A thin spiderweb of plaster that seemed to mimic the state of my life. At 3:12 a.m., I got up and made coffee from the rusty old machine in the corner. It tasted like plastic, but it was hot and bitter and real. And that was something. I sat by the window and watched the highway. No cars, just darkness and wind. I thought about going home, but the word home didn't feel real anymore. So I sat and breathed and rocked slightly, the way I used to rock my babies. When dawn finally cracked through the curtains, it was pale and soft. The world had kept turning. The birds still sang. The sun still rose. And somewhere inside me, a flicker of strength took root. Not hope, not yet, but something like breath, life, survival. I was still here. and I was still standing, alone, but whole. The sun had barely lifted above the trees when I pulled out of that motel parking lot. Eyes puffy, hair a mess, wearing the same clothes from yesterday, apron still tied around my waist like some sort of sick joke. The streets were quiet, dust dancing in the morning light. I hadn't slept, not really, but I'd made it through the night, and that felt like a win. I didn't know where I was headed, only that I needed coffee. Strong coffee. And something hot, real, and simple, something that didn't lie. A few miles down the road, I saw it. A Waffle House. Sitting by the highway like a lighthouse for the broken, the neon sign flickered open 24 hours, like a promise. Something about the smell of bacon and burnt toast hit me the moment I stepped out of the car. It was familiar, comforting, the smell of places where stories are told between forkfuls of hash. I slipped into a corner booth, pressed my back against the vinyl seat, and exhaled like I hadn't in days. The server, a black woman in her 50s with salt and pepper curls tucked under a pink visor, walked over and smiled. Not a fake smile, not polite, a real one, a knowing one. "You all right, baby?" she asked, her voice soft and rich like molasses. I shook my head. Tears welled up again. Unexpected. She didn't push, just poured me a cup of coffee and said, "Take your time. You don't have to say a word till you're ready." And Lord, those words broke me, because it had been so long since someone offered me space instead of solutions. I stared at that coffee for what felt like hours, the steam rising, the clink of plates, the chatter of truckers behind me. It all blurred into something warm, something alive. When she came back, she brought a plate I hadn't ordered. Scrambled eggs, toast, grits, and a waffle shaped like a heart. I looked up, confused. "You looked like you needed someone to take care of you today," she said with a wink, and I lost it. I cried. In the middle of a Waffle House. In front of strangers. I sobbed into a paper napkin, while this angel disguised as a waitress sat down across from me and held my hand. "I don't know who you are," she said gently, "but I know what a woman looks like when she's had her heart shattered. And I know you're still standing. That means something." Her name was Gloria. And I swear to you, I think she was sent by God. She didn't ask me to explain, didn't ask who did what or why. She just sat with me, sipping her own coffee, humming softly to a gospel song playing low on the radio, "Take Me to the King." And somewhere in that booth, something shifted. I didn't feel healed, but I didn't feel broken beyond repair either. Gloria made me laugh. She told me about her own life, how she left her cheating husband at 42 and never looked back, how she raised 3 boys on tips and gospel, and how she talks to God like a friend. "You'll find yourself again," she said, gripping my fingers tight, piece by piece, day by day. "Just don't give up. You hear me?" I nodded. Before I left, she hugged me tight. The kind of hug that doesn't ask for anything, just gives. She slid a slip of paper into my hand. Her number. "Call me if you ever forget how strong you are." As I got back into my car, the sun was higher now. The world was golden. And for the first time since the betrayal, I felt held. Not by Michael, not by Daddy, not by anyone who had lied to me, but by life, by strangers, by women who carry each other when the weight gets too heavy. And maybe, just maybe, by God, I hadn't planned on eating. Truth be told, the idea of food made my stomach twist. After a night curled up in that motel bed, trembling in the dim light with grief pressing against my ribs, I didn't feel like a person anymore. I felt like a ghost of myself, floating, aimless, numb. But my body had other plans. The hunger came suddenly, a sharp emptiness in my gut that had nothing to do with eggs or coffee. It was deeper. It was the kind of hunger that comes after losing something you can never replace. A hunger for warmth, for something real, for proof that I still belonged somewhere on this earth. So I started driving. I passed gas stations and shuttered thrift shops. Drove through a town I didn't know the name of, with sidewalks cracked like old skin and American flags flapping on crooked poles. And then I saw it. The soft yellow light of a Waffle House, sitting quiet off the side of the highway. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few trucks. The sign buzzed open 24 hours. I pulled in like it was calling me home. The inside smelled like everything I didn't know I needed. Bacon grease, burnt toast, cheap syrup, and hope. The heat hit me first. It wrapped around me like a grandmother's quilt, the kind that smells faintly of lavender and thyme. My hands were still shaking when I stepped inside. My apron was still tied around my waist from the morning before. I must have looked strange, like I had no idea where I was or who I was supposed to be. I picked a booth in the far corner, vinyl seat torn on one side. The table was sticky, the window fogged, but it was mine, for that moment. Safe. Then came her. She was everything solid in a world that had just caved in on me. Gloria. Her name tag read, 50-something. Brown skin, glowing beneath soft light. hair tucked in pink curlers beneath a visor that said, "Praise him." She looked at me like she saw straight through the mess. "You all right, baby?" Her voice wasn't rushed, wasn't performative, just gentle, like molasses. I couldn't speak. I didn't trust my throat not to betray me, so I shook my head. She nodded. No questions, just kindness. She poured me a cup of coffee, dark and hot and rich, and said, "Take your time. We got all the time in the world." Then she left me alone. No pressure, no pretending. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the steam from my cup to disappear, long enough for the sound of spatulas clinking and silverware scraping to become background music for the aching in my chest. I stared at the coffee like it could answer the questions I hadn't yet asked out loud. Gloria came back after a while. She didn't say a word, just set a plate down in front of me. Scrambled eggs, buttered toast, grits, and a waffle shaped like a heart. I looked up, startled. She winked. "You looked like someone who ain't been taken care of in a long time." And I broke. Right there in the middle of that Waffle House, I cried. I mean cried. Not polite tears, not a single drop trailing down a cheek. No, these were sobs from the gut. The kind that leave you gasping and red-eyed and clutching napkins like lifeboats. She didn't flinch. She didn't run. She sat down across from me and took my hand. Her skin was warm, her grip firm, like an anchor in a storm. "Men lie, baby," she said softly, like she'd said it before. "Sometimes it ain't about you. It's about the weakness in them. And when they break you like that, it ain't because you weren't enough. It's because they were never whole." I hadn't told her anything, and she already knew. She told me about her own story, how she walked away from a man who kept secrets to you, how she worked double shifts to raise her 3 sons, how she sang gospel songs in her kitchen to keep from screaming some nights. "You'll rise," she said. "It's in your bones. I can see it. The way you walked in here, baby broken, sure, but breathing. That's how it starts." I didn't finish the waffle, but I took a bite. It tasted like cinnamon and warmth and mercy, like someone saw me, really saw me. Before I left, Gloria hugged me. Not the kind of hug that ends after 3 seconds, no. The kind that says, "You matter." She slipped a folded napkin in my hand. Her number, "Call me when it gets heavy, even if it's 2 a.m. As I stepped out into the morning sun, something had shifted. The world was still broken. The betrayal still burned. But my chest, it didn't feel as hollow. And for the first time since the door opened on that awful day, I didn't feel invisible. I wasn't sure why I was going back. Not to forgive. Not to forget. Maybe just to breathe in the same space again and feel how different the air had become. Maybe to reclaim something. Or maybe just to prove to myself that I could walk into that house and still walk out whole. The road felt familiar and foreign all at once. The same cracked sidewalk, the same peeling white fence, the same magnolia tree that used to drop petals on the porch in spring. But nothing looked the same to my heart. That little house had held my whole life, and now it held the pieces I'd left behind. When I pulled into the driveway, my fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than I meant them to. I sat there for a while, engine off. Silence, thick. I watched the wind stir the curtains through the open kitchen window. I watched the rocking chair shift with no one in it. That house looked peaceful. But I knew better. It was the kind of peace that comes after a bomb. Quiet because there's nothing left to say. I opened the car door and stepped out slowly. My steps were careful, deliberate. I wasn't sure what I'd find inside, if anyone was even home, but that wasn't the point. I had come back for me, to see the place where my heart had been broken, to leave something behind, or maybe to pick something up. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. That house had never known how to lock out what needed to be kept away. Inside, the light filtered through sheer curtain. The dust in the air danced like it had all the time in the world. My shoes echoed against the floorboards, familiar and distant. Nothing had changed. The pictures still hung crooked on the walls. The old Afghan still lay folded over the back of the couch. But the stillness, that had changed. It wasn't cozy anymore. It was quiet. That heavy kind of quiet that wraps around your ribs and squeezes slow. I walked past the living room, past the kitchen, past the table where I'd once baked birthday cakes and filled out report cards and cried silently when no one was looking. My feet carried me to the hallway, and I didn't stop until I reached the bathroom. The door was open. And there, resting on the edge of the porcelain sink, was my wedding ring. It looked small, so small, like something a little girl would play with and pretend. Not something I had worn for over 4 decades. Not something that had meant forever. The gold had dulled. The engraving inside, "Always yours." M was still there, as if mocking me now. I picked it up, held it between 2 fingers, like it was foreign. Like it wasn't the same ring Michael had slipped on my hand when I was 17, when I believed in beginnings, when I thought love was enough. I turned it in my palm, felt the weight of it. It didn't weigh anything at all. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't begging for answers. She was calm. Not cold, but calm in that quiet way a woman gets when she's past the point of begging and arrived at the place of knowing. Then I heard him. Ellie, his voice behind me, low and unsure, like a child who'd broken something he couldn't fix. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I thought you might come back, he said. Still, I stayed silent. I didn't know what to say, so I left the ring. I thought maybe you thought wrong, I said, not unkind, just honest. He stepped into the doorway behind me. I could feel him there, breathing the same air, but I didn't move. I'm sorry, he whispered. That was the thing about Michael. He always whispered his regrets. I looked at him through the mirror. His face was tired, lined. His eyes, those same blue eyes I used to trust, were dull now, like the truth had drained the color from them. I finally turned to face him, not because I owed him that, but because I needed it for myself. I didn't come back for you, I said. I came back for the girl who walked out of here barefoot and broken. His eyes welled with something, maybe guilt, maybe sorrow, but I didn't reach for it. You left your ring, he said again. I shook my head. No, Michael. I left my silence, and I won't be picking that back up. I placed the ring on the counter, then I walked out. No final words, no goodbyes, no tears. Because some things don't need a dramatic ending. Some endings are quiet, strong, unshakable. And this was mine. I always thought that if I ever saw my daddy cry, it'd be at Mama's grave or holding one of his great grandbabies, not hiding shame behind silence. Not standing like a stranger in the same kitchen where he once spooned sugar into my tea and called me his little star, but grief. Grief rewrites everything. I returned 2 days after I'd left the ring behind. I didn't plan it. I just drove. The road was becoming a place of reflection for me. The only place where motion didn't mean chaos. Just space, distance, air between what I'd seen and what I still couldn't believe. I didn't expect to find Daddy there, but when I stepped inside, he was sitting at the kitchen table, back hunched, both hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, no TV on, no radio, no plate, just him and the silence. He didn't look up when I walked in. Coffee's old, he muttered, voice low and rough like gravel. I didn't answer, just leaned against the counter and looked at him. Really looked at the man who carried me on his shoulders when I was 5, who threatened my prom date with a rifle just to hear me laugh. The man who taught me how to braid a fishing line and slice watermelon just right. The man I trusted with every version of my heart. How do you even begin to speak to that man when he's the reason your world cracked open? I pulled a chair, sat across from him. Let the silence speak for both of us. His hands, old, calloused, scarred from years of hard labor, trembled as he finally looked up. His eyes were red, but dry. He didn't look ashamed. He looked empty. I thought I buried it, he said. I blinked. The feelings, the thing between me and Michael. I thought it was gone. I didn't flinch, didn't interrupt. He kept going. I didn't plan for it to go that far. Not for that long. At first, it was just confusion, loneliness. We were both isolated. Your mama was gone. You were grown. Michael was struggling. We leaned on each other. Then it turned into something else. I gripped my knees under the table. The words felt like vinegar poured on a wound. You were my father, I said, finally. He was my husband. How does that happen without someone noticing? His lips parted, then closed again, like he had answers but none worth saying out loud. You were supposed to protect me, I said softly, and you chose him. He winced, like the words slapped. I didn't stop loving you, Ellie. I shook my head. You didn't choose me. You didn't choose truth. You just disappeared into lies. He looked away, toward the sink, toward the window, anywhere but me. I told myself I deserved to be happy, even if it was ugly. That's when the tears came. Mine, not his. Not loud. Just quiet, steady rivers that wouldn't stop. He reached across the table, slow, cautious, and placed his hand over mine. I'm sorry, baby. I never meant to break you. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold back either. You didn't just break me. You broke everything you helped build. He closed his eyes, as if the truth physically hurt. Maybe it did. We sat there like that. 2 people tied by blood, separated by betrayal. I don't know how to fix it, he said. You can't, I replied. His shoulders sank. But you can face it. Stop hiding behind guilt. Speak it. Own it. Let it rot in daylight where it belongs. He nodded slowly. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. Good, I whispered. Because I'm not there yet. He looked at me, eyes shining, mouth trembling. And then, he did what I never expected. He cried. A quiet, broken sob, hands shaking, breath hitching. The way a man cries when he knows he's lost something he'll never earn back. I didn't comfort him. Because sometimes, a man needs to feel the weight of what he's done. Sometimes, sorrow is the only justice we get. When I stood up, he didn't stop me. I walked to the door, placed my hand on the knob, paused. Daddy. He looked up. I hope one day I can see you again. And not feel this. He nodded. So do I then. I walked out. Into the air, into the light, and it felt like the first breath after drowning. I didn't go to that little white church expecting to be healed. I didn't expect warmth or welcome. I didn't go for forgiveness, or answers, or hymns. I went because I didn't know where else to go. That Sunday morning, my soul needed somewhere to rest, even if just for a minute. Not inside, not in the pews. I wasn't ready for the altar, but I needed to be close. The sky was heavy, blanketed in gray, like it was holding back tears for me. I parked across the street beside the oak tree that had guarded that corner for decades. The same oak I used to sit under during summer picnics, barefoot and laughing with cousins, long gone. Back when faith was simple. When life hadn't carved these deep, unspoken lines in my chest, the church looked the same from the outside. White wood, steep roof, stained glass windows catching soft morning light. But nothing about it felt the same. Everything looked too small. Or maybe I had just outgrown the shell of the life I used to know. I didn't walk through the front doors. I didn't take a bulletin. I didn't shake hands or smile politely. I walked up the steps, slow and quiet, and sat down. Right there on the top stair, my knees close to my chest, my arms wrapped around myself like I had to hold everything together, or it would all spill onto the ground in pieces I couldn't gather back up. People passed me. Some nodded, some hesitated. No one spoke. The choir's voices filtered out through the wood, soft harmonies rising in worship while I sat there broken in silence. I didn't sing. I didn't pray. I just breathed. After a while, I looked up at the sky. God, I whispered. That's all I said. I didn't follow it with a request. I didn't demand justice or peace. I didn't ask why. I just said his name. Because sometimes, that's all the strength you have left. Just enough to speak it. To let him know you're still here, still breathing, even if barely. A tear rolled down my cheek. Then, another. Then, a quiet stream that soaked into the fabric of my blouse. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall. For the first time in days, I wasn't hiding my grief. I wasn't apologizing for my pain. I was letting it be seen. I remembered sitting on these very steps in my wedding dress. Michael had stood inside, waiting with that nervous smile, while Daddy kissed my forehead and said I was his angel. I had no idea then what those words would come to mean, how they'd burn years later. Footsteps broke my memory. A small boy approached, no more than 8, holding a yellow dandelion in his hand. He looked at me shyly, eyes wide and kind. For you? He said. I smiled weakly and took it. Thank you, I whispered. He didn't say more, just turned and hurried back through the doors. That little flower in my palm felt warmer than anything I'd held in days. Simple, pure, uncomplicated. I looked down at it. Its petals were uneven, its stem bent, but it was beautiful. It didn't have to be perfect to be a gift. And maybe. Neither did I. The church service ended soon after. People poured out in small waves. Chatter, soft laughter, the rustle of purses and keys. Some glanced my way, some didn't. I stayed seated. Then I saw her Pastor Denise, a tall, quiet woman in her 60s. She'd been leading this church since before Mama passed. Her sermons were gentle, always soaked in grace. She walked straight to me, no hesitation, and sat on the step beside me like she'd done it 100 times before. You don't have to say anything, she said. I nodded. She looked at the dandelion in my hand. Sometimes the smallest things carry the most light. I'm not ready to go in, I said softly. She smiled. That's all right. God doesn't only meet us at the altar. He meets us on the steps too. I closed my eyes. Let the weight of her presence anchor me. You're not alone, Ellie. I feel like I am. I know, she said gently, but feelings lie sometimes. Truth doesn't be sat together in silence. No preaching, no answers. Just breath and wind and shared stillness. When she stood, she squeezed my hand. You come sit here any time you need. The doors stay open. And so do the steps. I watched her walk away, her figure fading into the crowd. I sat a little longer, holding the flower, my fingers tighter around it now. The clouds had begun to shift, just slightly. A hint of sun peeked through. I stood, slow, legs stiff, heart tender. Turned toward the door, but didn't go in. Not today, but soon. I stepped down, one stair at a time. And I knew deep in my chest, that I'd left part of my sorrow on those steps. Not all of it, but enough to keep going. The guest room closet hadn't been opened in years, at least not by me. After Mama died, Daddy packed away most of her things and tucked them into boxes. Some were sent to charity. Others went to the attic. But one, just one, stayed in the guest room closet behind an old vacuum cleaner and a quilt I'd crocheted back in high school. A box I never asked about, never moved, never opened until now. It was raining again. That kind of southern rain that doesn't fall hard but lingers, soft and steady, like the sky itself is grieving. I was alone in the house. Daddy had gone to stay with Aunt Ruthie for a while. Michael. Well, he was wherever cowards go when the truth comes due. I wasn't looking for answers. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. But something, a stirring, a whisper, maybe even the weight of the silence itself, drew me toward that closet like a hand on my back. The room smelled like old cotton and cedar. The air was thick, like memories clung to it. I opened the closet door. The hinges creaked like they hadn't been moved since the house was built. I pushed the vacuum aside, lifted the folded quilt, and there it was. A cardboard box, taped up, edges worn. No label, no writing. Just a single strip of pink ribbon tied around the top. Faded, dusty. Still holding? I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the ribbon for a moment before I pulled it free. The bow unraveled with barely a tug, like even it had been waiting to let go. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were photos. Letters. A brooch I remembered Mama wearing every Sunday. A dried flower pressed into a page of her Bible. Her handwriting strong, neat, full of grace, unfolded recipes, and church bulletins. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and started to pull the pieces of her life into my lap. But what I didn't expect was the letter at the bottom. It was addressed to me, in her hand, to Eleanor. For when the silence becomes too loud, my throat tightened. I opened it slowly, the paper crackling like it hadn't breathed in years. My sweet Ellie, if you're reading this, then the day has come when you've had to face truths you never deserved. I don't know what brought you here, but if I know my daughter, it wasn't weakness. It was courage. There are things I never said out loud, things I knew but couldn't bear to name. I saw shadows in this house. I saw looks that lingered too long, whispers that stopped when I entered the room. I told myself it was nothing. I prayed it was nothing. But a woman always knows. Michael and your father shared something I couldn't understand, and I stayed silent because I thought silence was protection. I thought if I pretended not to see, I could save your innocence. But now, I see silence is not love. Silence is betrayal in soft clothing. I am sorry, Ellie, for not preparing you, for not protecting you, for not speaking sooner. But hear me now. What they did was not your fault. What they took from you, they had no right to. And what you will rebuild, it will be stronger than you ever imagined. Forgive me, if you can. But more importantly, forgive yourself for believing their lies. You are not broken, my daughter. You are the fire that survived the burn. With all the love this world can hold, Mama, I don't remember how long I sat there, letter clutched to my chest, rocking back and forth like a girl again. My tears fell onto the pages, blurring her words, but I already knew them by heart. She had known all along. And maybe her silence hadn't been fear. Maybe it had been heartbreak. Maybe she, too, had carried the weight of pretending until it broke her from the inside out. I placed the letter gently back into the box, wrapped it in the quilt, and closed the lid. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I finally understood. That box hadn't held memories. It had held permission. Permission to grieve. Permission to speak. Permission to live. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff, heart beating steady. The closet didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt clean, not whole, not healed, but cleansed, like something sacred had happened on that floor. It's not the mirror that's cruel. It's the truth that stares back when you've finally stopped lying to yourself. There's a long mirror in the hallway, just between the guest room and the bathroom, tall, framed in dark wood, faded on the edges where sunlight hits it in the mornings. It's been there since I was a child. I used to twirl in front of it, dress up in Mama's pearls, stick my tongue out at my reflection, and giggle at my crooked teeth. Over the years, it stopped being a toy, became more of a checkpoint, a glance before church, a quick fix to a strand of hair out of place, a place to pull yourself together before you walk out the door, pretending everything's fine. But I stopped looking at it long ago, at least, really looking, because somewhere along the line, that mirror started showing me a woman I didn't recognize, or maybe didn't want to. Today, something pulled me toward it, not out of vanity, not to check my blouse or smooth my hair, but because after everything, the motel, the Waffle House, the church steps, the box in the closet. I needed to see what survived. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that breathes with you when you finally stop running. I walked slowly down the hall. The walls felt closer than usual, like they, too, had secrets. My bare feet patted softly on the wood floor. I passed the bedroom. The scent of lavender still lingered from Mama's old sachet bag tucked in the drawer. And there it was, the mirror, standing tall and still, waiting, as if it knew I'd return eventually. I stopped in front of it. For a moment, I just stared at the frame, traced the edges with my fingers, not ready yet to meet her. The woman inside? When I finally lifted my eyes, I barely breathed. She looked older than I remembered, tired, but also lighter. There were deep lines around her mouth, the kind sorrow carves after too many sleepless nights. Her eyes, though swollen from days of crying, were sharp, focused, and something about the way her shoulders sat, not slumped, but strong, told me she had seen war and chosen to survive. I leaned in closer, touched my cheek. It was real. That woman in the mirror, she was me. Not the wife, not the daughter, not the polite hostess or quiet backbone. Just Ellie. I whispered it out loud. Ellie. Not Mrs. Mitchell, not sweetheart, not baby girl, just Ellie. And she smiled. It wasn't a bright smile. Not yet, but it was real. Tired? Yes, but alive. I traced the lines on my face with my fingertips. The curve of my jaw, the gray roots showing at my scalp, the hands that had folded laundry, held sick babies, chopped onions, signed permission slips, wiped away other people's tears for decades, now trembling just a little as they reached for their own reflection. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I said what I needed to hear. I forgive you. Not for what they did, but for what I allowed. For every time I stayed silent. For every moment I saw the signs and chose comfort over truth. For every year I swallowed doubt and called it peace. For every version of me that shrank, just to make others feel whole. I forgive you. And I meant it. Because healing isn't a straight line. It curves, it stumbles, it forgets and remembers. It burns and softens and bruises again before it finally stops bleeding. I looked into my own eyes and saw a flicker of the girl I once was. The girl with dirt on her knees and fire in her chest. The girl who read books under covers with a flashlight, who dreamed of becoming a writer, a traveler, a free woman. She was still there, buried under decades of compromise, but not lost. The mirror didn't offer comfort, but it offered truth. And for the first time, I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. Because that woman, looking back, she was no longer just a reflection. She was a witness. She was a survivor. She was becoming. I stepped back, took one last breath, then reached for the cloth I kept in the drawer nearby and wiped the mirror clean. Not because it was dirty, but because I was ready to see clearly. I always cared about birthdays. Ever since I was little, I believed they should be celebrated. Not with grand gestures, but with care. A warm meal, a cake made from scratch, someone remembering to say, "I'm glad you were born." It didn't need to be much, just something. Something to remind me that my life mattered, even a little. This birthday, I didn't expect a party. I didn't expect gifts or balloons or laughter. But I thought, maybe someone would call. Maybe Michael would show up. Maybe Daddy, even in all his shame, would remember the date. Not because I needed them, but because I wanted to believe someone still saw me. I spent the day alone. It was Tuesday. Gray skies, steady drizzle, the kind of weather that feels like God himself is trying to be quiet. I didn't go out, didn't answer the phone. Not that it rang. I stayed in my kitchen, cooked like I always did, out of habit, out of muscle memory. I roasted chicken with rosemary, peeled potatoes, made a soft butter glaze, mixed a little salad, even set the table. 2 plates, 2 cloth napkins, 2 glasses of sweet tea, with ice clinking in each one. Not because I thought someone was coming, but because it felt less humiliating to pretend I was expecting company than to admit I was not. 7 o'clock, no knock, no text. 7:15, still nothing. By 8, I sat down alone. I stared at the candle I had lit, flickering above a centerpiece of fake daisies I'd arranged earlier in the year. The fork in my hand felt too heavy. The food had cooled slightly, but I took a few bites out of obligation, not hunger. I chewed slowly, each bite tasting less like dinner and more like resignation. I whispered happy birthday to myself, not aloud, just silently, in my chest. After I cleaned the dishes, I pulled a small chocolate cake from the fridge. I had made it that morning, out of stubbornness, the kind that says, "You'll have a cake, even if no one else does." It was small, round, with fudge icing and tiny chocolate curls. I shaved myself. There was one candle. I lit it. I sat there, the flame reflecting in the kitchen window, dancing like a nervous secret. I didn't make a wish. I didn't blow it out. I just watched it flicker, watched the wax drip, watched time pass. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a birthday. It was a memorial, a funeral for the woman I used to be. The one who believed in shared tables, the one who made excuses for absence, the one who celebrated others and never asked to be celebrated in return. I let the candle burn down until the wick curled in on itself. The wax had melted halfway down the side of the cake. The house was silent. I stood, walked to the hallway, and opened the drawer in the credenza. Inside was a necklace, a string of soft pearls in a velvet pouch. No note, no tag, just the same necklace Michael had given me on our first anniversary. It had been left in the mailbox. No message, just a memory. I held it in my palm. It was beautiful, still, but it felt cold. I thought of how he'd once clasped it around my neck, kissed my collarbone, and said, "You shine better in pearls." That memory used to make me smile. Now it just felt hollow. I placed it back in the drawer, closed it softly, walked upstairs, brushed my teeth, turned down the bed, got beneath the covers without saying goodnight to anyone. The window was open. The wind smelled of earth and quiet. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, and I realized something. It wasn't that no one remembered. It was that they chose not to act. And that kind of forgetting, it's not accidental. It's deliberate. And that hurts more than being truly forgotten. But I also realized something else. This would be the last birthday I waited for someone else to make it matter. Because, from now on, I would bake my own cake. I would light my own candle. I would say my own name with love, even if no one else did. The Bible sat on my nightstand, same place it had always been. The one with Mama's name etched on the inside cover in faded gold, Eleanor May Richardson, gifted by her grandmother in 1957. It had been there for every wedding, funeral, birth, and sleepless night since. Growing up, Mama read from it every morning, her soft voice echoing across the kitchen while coffee brewed and biscuits baked. Psalms and Proverbs rolled off her tongue like lullabies, always ending with her whispered prayer, "Lord, keep us strong in the places we feel weakest." After she passed, I couldn't bring myself to open it much. Not because I didn't believe anymore, but because every page smelled like her. Every verse sounded like her voice in my ear. I wasn't ready for that. But after everything, the truth about Daddy, Michael's betrayal, the silence, the loneliness, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger anymore, not even grief. It was hunger. Not for food, not for answers, but for something that reminded me I still belonged to something greater than pain. So I sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling, and reached for her Bible. It was heavier than I remembered. Maybe it had absorbed the weight of everything it had witnessed. I opened the cover slowly. Her handwriting was still there, slanted, careful, loving. For Ellie, when your faith feels too quiet to speak, I turned a few pages. The paper crackled softly. Verses were underlined in pink. Notes in the margins. Little doodles of hearts beside words like mercy and forgiveness. Then, around Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. I saw something tucked between the pages. An envelope, thin, worn, yellowed around the edges. My name was written across the front. Ellie. Just that. No date, no instructions. My breath caught. It was Mama's handwriting. I stared at it for a long while before sliding it out. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the paper inside. Her scent wafted up lavender and thyme, and then I read, "My Ellie. If you're reading this, then you've reached the kind of moment I used to pray would never come. The kind of hurt that cracks your bones open and makes you question everything good you ever believed in. I don't know the shape of the pain you're carrying right now, but I know it's real, and I know it's heavy. You come from women who've survived much more than they deserved. But they didn't just survive, they lived. And you will too. I kept secrets, my girl. Secrets that still press on me. But I kept them because I believed silence was protection. I see now that I was wrong. There is no peace in hiding. There's only delay. I saw things between your father and Michael I didn't understand. I prayed it was nothing. I wanted to believe the best of both. But my silence cost you more than I'll ever know. I am so sorry. But Ellie, you were never the fool. You were the heart, the home, the glue, the faith, the soul that held things together even when you didn't realize it. And now, if it's all falling apart, maybe it's because it was never yours to carry alone. Please, my baby, do not let their betrayal bury you. Rise, cry until your chest is clear. Yell at God if you must, but don't close your heart. Keep it open, even if it aches. One day, you'll hold peace like a warm cup of tea, both hands wrapped around it, steam rising, heart steady. And you'll know that this letter wasn't just a goodbye. It was a beginning. With more love than the moon has light, Mama, when I finished reading, I pressed the paper to my lips. I didn't cry, not then. Instead, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for 20 years. I lay back on the bed, the Bible resting on my chest, the letter beside my heart. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, and for the first time since this all began, I felt held. Not by a man, not by a promise, but by the memory of a woman who'd loved me in silence. And now, finally, in words, Gloria invited me to the circle. It wasn't church-sponsored, it wasn't therapy, it wasn't even formal. It was a group of women who met every other Thursday at a diner off County Road 6, right next to the gas station with the crooked sign. No sign-ups, no rules, just coffee, pie, and space for truth. I didn't want to go at first. What would I even say? That my husband had been sleeping with my father for 20 years and I didn't see it coming. But Gloria, with her velvet eyes and no-nonsense voice, looked me straight in the heart and said, "You don't have to tell them everything. Just bring your silence. We'll hold it for you." So, I went. It was just past 7 when I pulled into the gravel lot. The sky was darkening early, that deep southern blue that wraps around you like a shawl. The neon sign buzzed overhead. Darla's Diner, home of the famous banana cream. Inside, the light was warm, yellow, soft, the kind that makes you feel like you're being rocked gently, even when you're standing still. They were already there. 6 women, different ages, shapes, colors, stories. But the moment I walked in, they all looked up and smiled. Not the kind of smile that asks you to perform. The kind that says, "We've been where you are. Sit." I did. Gloria patted the empty chair beside her. "This is Ellie." And that was it? No, what happened? No, tell us everything. Just, "This is Ellie." The conversation flowed like coffee. Slow, warm, sometimes bitter. There was laughter, the kind that rose from deep belly wounds. There were pauses, the kind that hold more truth than any monologue. Karen, a former school teacher, spoke first. She had lost her son to addiction and hadn't spoken to her husband in 3 years, even though they still lived under the same roof. "Grief," she said, "isn't just death. It's everything that should have been and wasn't." Tasha, a single mother of 4, talked about the day she walked out of her house barefoot with nothing but her purse and her keys. Sometimes freedom is quiet, just the sound of your own breath not being interrupted. An older woman named May said her husband had disappeared, literally packed a bag one morning and never came back. I thought I'd fall apart. Turns out, I'd been falling apart for years. That was just the crash. I didn't speak for a while. Just listened, absorbed. The stories weren't the same, but the ache was familiar. These weren't weak women. These were survivors of small devastations, the kind the world doesn't make documentaries about. When it was my turn, I opened my mouth and said nothing. My throat burned, my eyes stung. "I'm not ready," I whispered. Gloria touched my arm. "Then just be here." So I did. I drank coffee. I nibbled at pie. I breathed. And in that booth, under the low hum of lights and the scent of French fries, I felt something shift. I wasn't healed, but I wasn't invisible either. They saw me, not because of what I'd lost, but because of what I still had. Breath, bones, presence. At the end of the night, May slipped me a napkin. On it was scribbled, "You don't have to tell your story to belong, but when you're ready, we'll listen like it's scripture." I held it in my hand like a relic. Gloria hugged me outside. "Did it help?" she asked. I nodded. "It didn't fix anything," I said, "but it loosened the knot in my chest." "That's how it starts," she smiled. The wind was cold, but I didn't shiver. I got in my car and sat there for a moment. The seat felt softer, the steering wheel warmer. The sky above no longer looked like a ceiling. It looked like space. And space is where healing begins. It took me weeks to go, not because I didn't know where it was. I knew exactly. Lot 24 Oak Hollow Cemetery, under the second pecan tree near the back. But I wasn't ready. What do you say at the grave of a man who broke your world in half and didn't live long enough to explain why? Daddy died 3 months after the truth came out. Heart attack, they said. Quick, quiet, alone. He didn't leave a note, didn't make a call, didn't say goodbye. Part of me thought he'd done it on purpose, that his shame had grown so heavy it finally collapsed his heart. Another part of me, the daughter part, hoped he just hadn't had the time. That, if he could have, he would have written something. Anything. But he didn't. So I was left with silence. The funeral was small. Just me, Aunt Ruthie, and 2 neighbors who brought store-bought cookies and didn't ask questions. There was no eulogy, no music, no flowers. He hadn't wanted any of that. Just bury me quiet, he'd told Ruth. No fuss. And we did. A plain pine box, lowered into the earth, no stone, no marker. He said he didn't want to be remembered. But I did. I needed to remember. Because forgetting, pretending none of it mattered, wasn't healing, it was hiding. So, today, I went back. It was early morning. Sky, still pale. The air smelled like moss and wet earth. I parked under the tree, the one with bark so old it curled like parchment. I didn't bring flowers, just a thermos of coffee. Black, how he drank it. And the letter Mama had written me, the one I now kept folded inside my Bible. I found the spot easily. The grass had grown tall around it, unbothered by memory. I sat cross-legged on the ground, the thermos warm in my hands. "Hi, Daddy," I said quietly. The words felt strange, too small, too late. I wasn't sure if I should come. The wind rustled above. A bird sang once, then fell silent. I thought maybe I'd scream when I got here. I thought I'd bring a rock and smash something, or sit here and cry until I ran out. I looked down, but I'm just tired. I poured a little coffee onto the dirt beside me. "It's your birthday tomorrow." I almost forgot. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the letter. I read Mama's letter again last night. She knew. About you and Michael. She didn't say it loud, but she saw it. My voice cracked. "And you knew. She knew." A tear fell. Not fast, not heavy, just enough to mark my cheek. I spent so many years trusting you, believing every story, every handshake, every I love you. And now, every one of those memories feels altered. I looked up at the sky, where the light was beginning to warm. I needed you to be more than you were. I needed you to say something. But now, I realize, I closed my eyes. You couldn't? I unfolded Mama's letter, held it against my chest. She said, "Silence isn't love. That silence is betrayal in soft clothing." I didn't understand it at first, but now I do. I traced my fingers along the edge of the grass. "But I don't hate you." The words surprised me, but they were true. I wanted to. Lord knows, I tried. I was angry, Daddy. So angry. Not just for the betrayal, but for the years of pretending. The years I spent trying to earn love you were giving away in secret. I exhaled. But then I remembered you holding my bike steady the first time I rode without training wheel. I remembered you singing Johnny Cash in the kitchen while Mama laughed. I remembered you pulling me from the creek when I fell in, arms shaking, face pale. I stared at the ground beneath me. You were two things at once, a father and a storm. I stood slowly, brushed the dirt from my coat. You didn't give me the closure I wanted, but I came to give it to myself. I took the last sip of coffee and poured the rest into the earth. Then I whispered, "I forgive you." Not loudly, not for the world, just for me. For the little girl still waiting to hear that it wasn't her fault. I turned to leave. The breeze picked up, and for a split second, I could swear it smelled like his aftershave. Familiar, haunting, human. I didn't look back. Some graves don't need markers. Some memories don't need stones. Just a name spoken softly, and a heart willing to let go. I didn't just survive. I became someone I never thought I had permission to be. Becoming her wasn't sudden. There was no lightning bolt, no grand moment of clarity. It was quiet. It came on slowly, like sunrise, filtering through lace curtains. Soft, persistent, and gentle. At first, I didn't even notice. I just began doing things I hadn't done in years. I'd sit on the porch with a cup of coffee before the sun rose. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to hear the stillness. I began humming again. Not full songs. Just little melodies that drifted from somewhere deep. Tunes Mama used to sing while folding sheets. It was the first sign that something inside me was waking up. I got rid of the old curtains in the kitchen, put up soft white ones, painted the cupboards, bought myself a vase and kept it filled with fresh flowers. Sometimes from the store, sometimes from the side of the road. I made space for myself, not just physically, but emotionally. And it felt unfamiliar at first. I wasn't used to choosing me. One afternoon, I found a photo in a drawer. Me, at 22, barefoot in the grass, laughing into the sky, hair wild, eyes bright. I held it in my hands for a long time, cried. Then I framed it, set it on my dresser. Not because I missed her, but because I realized she never really left. She'd just been waiting for the right time to return. I started writing again, just for me. Letters I never sent. Thoughts I never spoke. Some days, I'd write to the Ellie that once loved Michael. Other days, to the daughter who couldn't understand her father. But most often, I wrote to the woman I was becoming. I began reading poetry again, sipping tea slowly, lighting candles at night, dancing in the kitchen when no one was looking. I started wearing earrings again, even if I had nowhere to go, even if no one would notice, because I noticed. I took a job at the church library, 2 days a week, filing old hymnals, recommending devotionals to women who came in with tired eyes and soft smiles. One afternoon, a young girl named Clarissa asked, "Did your life turn out the way you thought it would?" I paused. No, I said softly. But I think it turned out the way it needed to. And that's the truth, isn't it? We think our stories have to follow a certain path. We think love should look like fairy tales. But sometimes, love looks like letting go. Like starting over at 62. Like choosing peace after decades of chaos. I joined Gloria's women's circle again. Showed up with banana bread and a heart more open than it had been in years. We cried, we laughed, we lit candles for our younger selves, and we reminded each other that healing is not a straight road. It's a garden path, with soft turns and blooms you didn't plant. I planted flowers in the yard again. Peonies, Mama's favorite. They bloomed late, but they bloomed anyway, just like me. The day I knew I had changed, really changed, was a Tuesday. I had just made soup. Rain tapped softly on the window, and I looked at the empty chair across from mine. And instead of feeling lonely, I felt full, because I had myself. And that was enough. I had survived betrayal, buried pain, grieved old versions of myself, but I had not turned bitter. I had turned wise. One night, I stood in front of the mirror, looked at my reflection. She had lines around her eyes, silver strands in her hair. But there was light in her gaze, a softness that only comes from enduring the fire and walking out whole. I whispered, I love you. And this time, I meant it. If this story touched your heart, sweetheart, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you'll always hear the next woman's voice. I read every comment with love. Your story matters, too. Now go on and watch the next video that's waiting on the screen. It might just carry the very healing you didn't know you needed.